At 4:17 p.m., two things arrived at my door: a delivery truck full of flour and a court petition to take my life away. They called it emergency guardianship, said I was confused, vulnerable, a danger to myself, and the signature at the bottom? My daughter's. I was standing over a whiteboard in the loading dock, arrows and miles and names, running the company I built from a church kitchen, when the phone rang. "Aunt Allie, will you come to my pinning ceremony on Friday? I want you to put the pin on me." Harper's voice trembled like a bird deciding whether to land. I pressed the phone to my ear and leaned against the office window. From here, I could see our names stenciled on the side of the vans. Prairie Pantry Kitchens in blue letters. We'd picked up my dining room table with a coupon book open to the paint aisle. The east side of Tulsa glinted with late afternoon sun and a promise of one more run before traffic hit. You can tell a lot about a city by the way it sounds at quitting time. Ours sounded like pallets being slid across concrete, a forklift beeping in reverse, somebody laughing too loudly because they made it through another Monday. I said, "Of course I'll be there, front row." She exhaled into the receiver, relief doing that soft thing it does when it gets a place to sit down. She said, "They said we can choose who pins us. Some girls pick their moms, some girls pick their husbands. I want you." I studied the board. Arrows, mileage, pie charts. Once upon a time, I had a different kind of chart. PTA bake sale budgets, church potluck signups, the kind of list you make when your life fits inside a cul-de-sac and a calendar. That was before the funeral, before Renee and Todd started managing me. "Mom, you shouldn't be driving anymore," Renee had said, standing in my kitchen with a tote from Target like she'd come to organize grief. "This fog, it's normal, but we need to keep you safe." Safe is a good word until somebody uses it as a leash. Passwords got updated for my protection. The savings moved somewhere easier to watch. I went to the county library to print pictures for the funeral thank you cards and came home to find the garage code changed and a sticky note in the door. Memory care. Tours at 2 p.m. This is how control looks in real life. It's not a lock in a dungeon. It's a neat post-it and the word safety said in a tone that makes your spine stiff. 8 years have passed since then, but the way your own child says it's for your own good has a half-life longer than uranium. If you're listening for it, you'll hear it echo forever. "I'll be at your ceremony, Harper, and I'll bring extra bobby pins because those hats slide." She laughed, wet-eyed. "You always think of the little things." I spent 30 years keeping other people alive with little things. I know what matters. We hung up, and I let my forehead rest against the window glass. The loading dock spread out beneath me like a chessboard. A driver called up from the floor, "Ellie, Mr. Dalton's here with the produce." And I waved. A little thing. Every day in this building is a string of little things that add up to something sturdy. Prairie Pantry Kitchens didn't exist when I climbed onto the Greyhound with a single suitcase, a coffee that tasted like burnt hope, and $260 folded flat in my wallet to make it look like more. The bus rolled past fields and Brahms billboards, and a sky bigger than anything I had words for. I cried so quietly, it made my ribs ache. My husband had been gone 3 months. A cardiologist said the word aneurysm, and the mail kept coming like the world hadn't been notified. Renee took my keys. Todd took my checkbook. The neighbor brought a casserole and said, "Let them help, honey. Children know best." I stood in my kitchen like a visitor and realized I wasn't sure where to put my hands anymore. Tulsa didn't welcome me with trumpets. It offered a blue roof diner off 169 with a help wanted sign and a manager who looked tired enough to trust me. I took the graveyard shift. I poured coffee at 2 a.m. for men who fix air conditioners and women who take care of other people's mothers for a living. I learned the names of the truckers who tipped in quarters and the nurse aides who ate pancakes on their way to somewhere cold and fluorescent. The smell of bacon is a kind of glue. It held me together while I learned how to wake up again. "You bake?" the owner asked one night when I took too long staring at a row of pies we didn't have. "My mother used pecan pie to apologize," I said, and he handed me the keys to the kitchen like that was a reasonable answer. The church down the road let me use their kitchen on Tuesdays, so I made chicken pot pies with hand-rolled crusts and wrote my phone number on masking tape. A farmer's wife pre-ordered 6 with cash and a hug. Then her sister called, then a neighbor. The first time I delivered a trunk full of pies to the Saturday market, I thought, maybe this is what a pulse feels like when it returns to a body. A friend found me a dented trailer with a griddle. A stock boy from the grocery store helped me spray it blue on a windy afternoon we still joke about. The blue trailer became a food truck. The food truck became a kitchen we rented by the hour to women who had recipes and no room to breathe. We called it Prairie Pantry Kitchens because the Midwest is stubborn and the pantry knows everybody's secrets. Our logo is a whisk and a wheat stalk and a heartbeat because there is no such thing as just food. There's only food that gets people through. Harper Lane came through the back door of my first kitchen and asked if I paid cash. "I start CNA classes at the community college," she said, cheeks pink with a mix of hope and hunger. "I need a job that doesn't ask questions when I have to leave early for clinicals." "I pay on Fridays," I told her, "and I ask every question." She held my gaze the way girls do when they've learned that questions come with consequences. "Like what? Like who told you you weren't built for big things?" I said, and to her credit, she laughed. She could stack lids faster than anybody I'd met, and she sang under her breath in a voice that made me wonder whoever told her to be quiet in the first place. On the hard days, she'd call me from the hospital's quiet room and just let me listen to the fluorescent lights hum. When she failed pharmacology the first time, she cried into the phone in the parking lot outside Walgreens, and I backed my car out of the van line to pick her up. "Show me the parts that got you," I said, and we wrote drug names on index cards and taped them inside the walk-in freezer because sometimes you have to make yourself cold to think straight. Years stacked themselves like sheet pans. We opened a second kitchen near the fairgrounds, then a third by the river, then a warehouse. We hired drivers, we learned the names of the health inspectors and bought them coffee, and never once tried to bribe them, which couldn't have been said for everybody. We built a scholarship fund that covered exam fees for CNAs climbing to LPNs and RNs. Women who feed the city should be able to heal it too, I told the reporter who insisted on taking my picture. I said it and then hid in the walk-in freezer until the blush bled out of my cheeks. I was still smiling from Harper's call when Dee from the front desk marched in with a stack of mail and a look that always meant it was time to sit down. "Certified," she said. "You got to sign." I clicked the green pen open and scrawled my name where the courier pointed. He left with the last of the day's light, and I tore the envelope along the top with a finger I keep a thumbnail long for jobs like this. In the matter of Caldwell, Lorraine, petition for emergency guardianship. Hearing Monday, 9 a.m., Tulsa County Courthouse. My hands went cold, and then hot, and then useless. The petition cited confusion and susceptibility to exploitation and impaired judgment like they were symptoms you could buy at Walgreens. It read like a report on a stranger. The signature looked exactly like my daughter's, because it was. The past rose and sat in the room. There was the neat post-it, the garage code, the word safety said in a tone that turns a living woman into a polite problem. I stared at the paper the way you look at a tornado on the horizon. You can pretend it's just weather, or you can get in the bathtub and hold a mattress over your head. I called Carmen Alvarez, the probate attorney whose office sits down the hall from our accountant. Carmen has the calm voice of a woman who has read every awful thing people do to the people they claim to love. "Bring everything," she said, papers shuffling in the background. "Medical clearance, your P&Ls, the foundation paperwork, board minutes, emails if you have them. And Ellie, don't skip that pinning ceremony. Bullies love it when you cancel your life to manage their mess." I drove home along 71st with the windows cracked, September slouching toward fall. A high school football field glowed under stadium lights, and a river of parents in folding chairs formed like a ritual they've been practicing since the 70s. You can measure a town by how it gathers. Tulsa gathers for football, for barbecue, for the way you say hello to a stranger at Quick Trip like you already know how she takes her coffee. I waved at Mrs. Denton, walking a dachshund with more opinions than legs, and my heart slowed from sprinting to a jog. Saturday afternoon, my phone pinged with a text from a woman I knew from church pantry days in Missouri. We hadn't spoken in a year. She wrote, "Renee asked me to write an affidavit that you forget names and leave burners on. I told her no. Call me if you need me." A warning is a kindness when it arrives in time. I set the phone face down on the table. I was already seeing Monday like a split screen. Harper and white scrubs under bright lights and a courthouse hallway that smelled like old paper and the kind of fear you put on a blazer to cover. Sunday after service, I agreed to meet Renee and Todd at the Panera off the interstate, because if you're going to have a conversation that might turn you inside out, it helps to do it in a place with coffee and bread you can tear in your hands. I chose a booth facing the door like women do when we've learned. Renee arrived in a blazer she used to borrow from me. She looked perfect in the way a person does when perfection is the only thing standing between her and collapse. "Mom," she said, "you look good." She stretched the word like gum in a car seat. Todd examined the menu like it had interest rates. "Why an emergency guardianship?" I asked, skipping the pretense that this brunch was about eggs. Renee clasped her hands like prayer was a performance. "We're worried," she said. "You gave money to a hospital. You work with strangers. There's an article about you on the internet. That's not like you." "It is now," I said. Todd leaned in like he smelled an opportunity. "Your brand is valuable. If something happens..." "Something did happen," I said. "Your father died, and then I learned to live." Renee's smile cracked the way ice does when the pond is ready to let go. "It's for your safety," she said. There's that word again. If you wanted to know whether I was safe, you could have asked. You filed instead. She slid a manila folder across the table. "We can withdraw if you sign a power of attorney and sell the business. We'll move you to a patio home near us. HOA handles everything. Very low stress." Control neatly gift-wrapped. I pushed the folder back with 2 fingers and said, "See you Monday," and left my half of the cinnamon roll untouched because sometimes you need to make a point to yourself that you are not a woman who finishes sugar in the face of a threat. Friday came the way big days do, on a wave of lists and a moment of quiet before you turn the key. The hospital auditorium at St. Francis smelled like starch and nerves. A banner read "Nurse Pinning Ceremony" in navy letters that made me think of church bulletins and the year my mother hand-lettered every name on a VBS certificate like it was a proclamation. Families filled rows with grocery store bouquets and camera phones. A baby fussed, and someone's grandma shushed him in a tone that could make a grown man reconsider his life. I found my seat in the second row. Harper's foster parents waved from across the aisle, faces already damp with pride. A dean in academic robes stepped to the podium and spoke about call lights and courage and the kind of love that clocks in.
A slide flicked to the screen. Prairie Pantry Foundation scholarship recipients, and our logo appeared in the corner. That little blue whisk and heartbeat we chose because we wanted something humble and sturdy and true. They called Harper Lane. She walked to the stage in white scrubs and the kind of shoes you buy at 3 a.m. after a double shift and a hard cry. She scanned the crowd until she found me. Her chin quivered. I stood because some moments require your legs as testimony. She handed me the pin and turned slightly to give me the fabric, and I felt my fingers go clumsy. There is a reason mothers usually do this. Hands that button coats and braided hair know the body they're touching. Mine learned in a church kitchen and a food truck line, but love is a universal language in the hands. I pressed the pin through cloth and whispered, "You belong here." She leaned in, cheek brushing mine. "So do you," she said, and I swallowed a sob because grief and joy are neighbors who share the driveway. The dean said something about community partners and access and how not everybody makes it here without a net. Applause rose like a warm front, and I let it wash the courtroom out of my head. In the lobby afterward, a young reporter from the local paper sidled up with a notebook and a hopeful look. "Ms. Lane," she said, "who pinned you today?" "My Aunt Ellie," Harper said, smiling so wide I saw the girl she could have been if the world had been kinder earlier. The reporter turned to me. "Why nurses?" "Because women who carry trays at midnight know how to carry other things, and because this city needs good hands." My phone buzzed. "Carmen, don't forget your binder Monday. Navy suit. Judges like Navy." People say it like a joke, but judges really do like Navy. It reads a steady on everybody. Monday morning, the elevator at the Tulsa County Courthouse took its time, like a grandmother stepping off a curb. The hallway smelled like paper and history. Outside courtroom 4B, I sat with my binder balanced on my knees, tax returns, board minutes, the letter from my doctor that said no signs of cognitive impairment beyond normal aging, which is a phrase that made me want to write a thank you note to my brain. People think aging is an insult. In this body, it felt like proof I had survived. Renee arrived with Todd and a lawyer and a suit that looked like it had its own credit score. She wouldn't meet my eyes. When the bailiff called our case, we sat at separate tables, like a divorce for people who never remarried each other after birth. The judge listened longer than I expected. Renee's lawyer said the words vulnerable and confusion and susceptible to exploitation with professional sorrow. Renee testified about how I gave money to a hospital and hired people I didn't know and lived in an apartment with stairs. Todd talked about brand value and risk and how auditors could miss things. I wondered for a minute if courtrooms are designed to make women doubt what their hands have built. The ceiling lights buzzed. A woman in the gallery dabbed at her eyes because somebody else's business had touched that place in her that remembered something. When it was my turn, I stood. My knees felt like the first step after kneeling in the garden too long. "I lost my husband," I said, voice steady because practice makes a muscle. "Then I lost my place in my own life. I built another one. I employ 142 people, drivers and bakers, and women who didn't think they'd ever get a W-2 with their own name on it. We have audited books. We pay sales tax on time. The hospital can tell you how many nurses finished school because we paid for their exam fees. The city inspector can tell you every oven we've serviced and every thermometer we've replaced. I get lonely. That is not incompetence." Carmen handed the binder up. The judge flipped through, pausing at a photograph of our Thirst kitchen, a stained glass window, a row of aluminum pans, a girl with Harper's chin and my stubborn energy stacking lids like prayer. "Miss Alvarez, this is thorough," he said. "My client likes documentation," Carmen said without smiling, which is how you know she's good at her job. The lawyer cleared his throat. "But, Your Honor," he said, "the danger of exploitation remains. Her generosity suggests suggestibility." We worry more about exploitation when family hides control behind the word safety. Silence does a particular thing in a courtroom when truth takes the seat reserved for it. The judge leaned back. "The petition denied," he said. "Miss Caldwell retains her rights. The court encourages family counseling if reconciliation is desired. This bench will not be a forum for settling old scores." His gavel sounded like a door bolt sliding home. In the hallway, Renee's shoulders slumped, and for an instant the blazer and the perfect hair and the arguments fell off her, and I saw my girl at 16 after her first heartbreak, mascara smudged in a Target parking lot, while I told her she would not, in fact, die. People do not return to who they were, but sometimes they glance in that direction. "Mom," she whispered, "we were scared." "I was too," I said. "Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is tell a truth that makes you human. But you don't get to own me to feel safe." Todd shifted like a man who lost a case and a narrative. "What now?" he asked, and whether he meant with the court or with our family, I couldn't tell. "Now," I said, "you can choose." I opened my tote and pulled out 2 envelopes I'd stuffed there that morning, knowing the day might need them. In the first, a printed list of 3 family counselors Blue Cross would cover with phone numbers highlighted because I'm a woman who highlights phone numbers. In the second, a volunteer schedule for Prairie Pantry Kitchens. 200 hours in the dish room to start, with your names on the roster like everybody else's. If you want to see my life, you start where the hot water is. And therapy, non-negotiable. Todd lifted his chin. "We're not criminals." "No," I said, "you're afraid, but fear with power turns into control. I won't live under that." Renee swiped at a tear she didn't want me to notice and failed. "Will you come up for Sunday dinner sometime? I could make that lemon chicken you—" "Someday," I said, "when you can invite me without asking for my keys." They left holding hands like people crossing a busy street for the first time in a long time, careful, uncertain, maybe willing to learn. I stepped outside into an Oklahoma noon that had no business being that bright. Food trucks lined the curb because it was lunch hour, and the whole scene felt like something out of a movie about cities that remember to feed people. Birria tacos, a lemonade stand with a line of nurses in sensible shoes, a man selling smoked turkey legs out of a rig that probably skirted 6 ordinances and still felt like home. The smell of grease and cilantro and decision. My phone buzzed. "Harper, night shift. NICU slammed. Do you still have those cheddar biscuits?" "Always," I wrote back. "Meet me at the dock at 6. Wear comfortable shoes." We rolled trays into the hospital service entrance with names scribbled in Sharpie. Night charge, respiratory, new grad who hasn't eaten since 7. Harper's hair was back in a ponytail she'd redone in the elevator. The freight doors opened with a groan I'd learned to love. It is a particular joy pushing food toward people who forget they're human because they're too busy keeping babies breathing. "I used to think the pen meant I belonged to the hospital," Harper said, loading muffins into a warmer outside the nurse's station. The light made her look older and younger at the same time. "What does it mean now?" I asked. She thought for a second, the way smart people do when they learn to trust the pause. "I think it means I belong to the people who need me," she said, "and to myself." We rode the elevator back down with an empty cart and the kind of tire that tastes like victory. The doors opened onto a lobby where a janitor hummed a hymn in Spanish, and the security guard waved the kind of wave you save for regulars. We pushed out into a parking lot that was starting to give itself to evening and stood there a minute because sometimes the only reasonable response to a day is to stand still and let it settle in your bones. My life did not come back. It rerouted. It stopped at a diner at 2 a.m. and a church kitchen at noon and a warehouse at dawn and a courtroom where I learned that the love I want doesn't put a leash on my wrist and call it safety. The love I want shows up with gloves for the dish room and an apology that doesn't need an audience. At home, I kicked off my shoes and leaned my hip against the kitchen counter the way women do when we've carried too many bags in from the car. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla because I keep a bottle of it open near the stove for company. Company comes less often than it used to, and more often than I was told it would. People like to warn women what will happen to them if they choose themselves. I wish they'd warn them what will happen if they don't. My dining table held 3 stacks. On the left, invoices to pay. In the middle, a folder of letters from nurses thanking us for exam fees I will never show anybody because gratitude is tender and private. On the right, a photo of my husband. They captured him in the act of laughing on our porch swing, with his head thrown back and one hand catching the brim of his hat like joy could steal it. I touched his face the way you touch a photograph when nobody's watching. You wouldn't believe the day, I told him. You would recognize it, though. You always said courage shows up in work clothes. The next morning, I met with Dee to go over the week and circled numbers with a pen I like because it makes a confident line. We argued in the affectionate way about whether to spend the extra money on a better carton sealer, and then decided yes, because the cheap one always sticks on the rush. A new hire showed up 10 minutes early and stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was inside yet. I handed him a hairnet and said, "Welcome. You're not late, so you're already in the top 10%. At lunch, I took a plate out behind the warehouse and ate sitting on the curb like a teenager because sunshine heals things therapy can only name. My phone pinged. A number I didn't recognize texted, "This is Judge Whitlow's clerk. He asked me to tell you he liked your binder. That's not official. He just said it." I laughed out loud, alone behind a building with a fork in my hand, and the knowledge that sometimes the world does you a small kindness on purpose. I sent a reply that said, "Tell him it's color-coded. He'll sleep even better." A week later, a note came in the mail from Renee. No legal head hurter, just her handwriting on a card with watercolor peaches, because she still shops at the same place for stationery that she always did. She wrote, "I signed up for a Thursday slot in the dish room. Todd's doing Tuesday nights. We called the counselor. We're trying." Trying is a word that gets laughed at by people who haven't watched someone learn to walk again. It is also the only word that has ever saved a family. I went to the kitchen on Thursday at 6 to check inventory, not to check on them, which is an important distinction. They were at the sinks wearing aprons that made them look like kids at a science fair. Todd had soap up to his elbows. Renee was laughing in that rusty way laughter has when it hasn't come out in a while. She saw me through the steam from the sanitizer and raised her hand. I raised mine back. We did not speak. We were busy. On my way out, I passed the bulletin board where we keep pictures of people who finished something, degrees, programs, parole. I taped up a photo from Harper's Penning, an inkjet print with the colors a little too bright and my mouth open in a smile I didn't know I could still make. I took a pen and wrote underneath, "You belong here." On Sundays, the apartment complex smells like laundry and after-church macaroni. I walk the dog for Mrs. Denton when her knees hurt, and we talk about her daughter who lives in Ohio and the cardinal that tapped on her window last week like it had news. I bake pecan pies on the days when the world needs apologizing to, which is most days, and I give them to neighbors who know how to return a dish on time. I keep a spare apron on the hook by the door for people who think they can't cook and then find out they can. One night, just as the sky went the exact color of forgiveness, my phone buzzed. A number with no name. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't. "Miss Caldwell," a woman said, voice careful, practiced. "This is Angela. I'm Renee's sponsor. I don't usually make calls like this, but she asked me to tell you she finished her 3rd counseling session and she didn't cry the entire time. I thought you'd want to know." I sat down on the floor because chairs aren't always right for the news your heart has been waiting on. "Thank you," I said. "Tell her the dish room will be short on Friday. If she wants to be useful, that's a good place to start." After we hung up, I opened the back door and leaned on the railing that keeps me from breaking my neck and looked out at the pool that's always a little too cold and the shrub someone planted in a fit of optimism. The city hummed its nightly hymn. Somewhere, a kid practiced trumpet in a way that made me think he would either quit tomorrow or play the national anthem at the Drillers game by June. Here is what I know at 73 that I did not know at 23 or 43 or even 64. Safety without respect is control. Love without boundaries is captivity. Choose the kind that frees everybody, or you will wake up one day in a house with a clean garage and a soul you don't recognize. On the fridge, a magnet holds a list of things I'm not willing to forget. Renew the van tags, check on Mrs. Denton's dachshund's nails, remind Harper to eat between patients, call Carmen to ask if we can put a clinic in the new building with the windows that make the morning look expensive. Breathe. Pray. Eat something green even if you don't feel like it. Buy more index cards. Keep a pen where you can reach it. Keep a boundary where they can see it. Keep a door where you can open it. And if a girl calls and asks you to put a pin on her chest so the whole world can see what she survived for, you say yes. You put on lipstick. You stand in the second row like it is the throne your life built. You slide the pen through the cloth and you say, you belong here. Because somebody said it to you once, and that is how the world changes. One sentence, one steady hand, one boundary that turns out to be a bridge.